Welcome to the Antiquarian Booksellers Association of America Virtual Book Fair Boston Edition. We'd like to thank the fair sponsor, Michael's Insurance. Michael's Insurance has over 40 years experience providing fine art insurance and is devoted to protecting owners of fine arts, rare books, and antiquities against financial loss. Learn more at michaelsinsurance.com. Today's special program is Ticknor Society Collectors Roundtable, The World of Edward Gorey. My name is Nicole Reese, and I'm a bookseller, a member of the ABAA, and chair of the Boston Book Fair Committee. For those of you who are not aware, the ABAA was founded in 1949 to promote interest in rare and antiquarian books and book collecting and to foster collegial relations. We strive to maintain the highest standards in the trade. All members agree to abide by the ABAA's Code of Ethics. Following this program, we hope you will consider visiting the virtual book fair at abaa.org/bbf. It is continuously open until 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Sunday, November 20th. A few housekeeping issues. We are recording this session and it will be available at a later date on the ABAA's YouTube channel. If you have any questions, we encourage you to move your computer cursor to the bottom of the screen and write your question in the Q&A section. The ABAA headquarters team will help us with those questions at the end of the session. If you would like to share a comment with all in attendance, please use the chat function at the bottom of the screen. It is now my pleasure to introduce Shannon Struble, President of the Ticknor Society. Thank you.
Hi, welcome everyone to the Ticknor Society Collectors Roundtable. As Nicole said, I'm Shannon Struble, the President of the Ticknor Society, and I just want to begin by thanking Susan Benny, Eloisa Mesqua from the ABAA HQ and the Book Fair Committee for helping to make this happen. Before I introduce our three panelists, I am pleased to announce the winner of the 2021 Ticknor Collecting Prize, which is awarded annually to a New England collector of books, manuscripts, and/or ephemera. Learn how you can enter to win next year's prize and get information on our events and our membership on our website at ticknor.org, ticknor.org. This year's winner is Erica Hapke-Knowles with her submission titled A Pleasant Painting, Isn't It? New Milford, Connecticut as Artist's Muse. And congratulations to Erica. On with the show. So the theme of this year's roundtable is the world of Edward Gorey, of which our three panelists are happy residents. Gregory Hischak is a writer, performer, and Gregory Hischak is a writer, performer, and book artist. He has been gathering Gorey-related materials and curating new exhibits at the Edward Gorey House in Yarmouth Port, Massachusetts since 2014, and he was appointed the house's director in 2020. Patrice Miller is Proprietrix of Aredian Press, a bookbinder and a Gorey collector. She has been taken with Edward Gorey's humor and skill for over 50 years, and her family's Gorey collection reflects her continued fascination. After retirement from federal service, Patrice took up bookbinding with plans to bind or rebind all of Gorey's primary works. She also created her own imprint, Aredian Press, in 2016. Under which she published two Gorey first editions, The Mourning Fan and The Worsted Monster. Christine Vonderlin is the Director of Illustration Art and a 25-year veteran of the book department at Swann Auction Galleries, New York. She has written about, lectured, and moderated panel discussions on rare books, illustration, and cartoons, but especially loves discussing her favorite area of expertise, Edward Gorey. In addition to handling several private collections of Gorey books and ephemera, her department has offered over 75 works of his original art over the past decade. Thank you so much, all of you, for taking part in this roundtable.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you, Shannon.
So it's clear from your bios that you all relate to Gorey through varied experience. So let's start by covering how each of you came to know Gorey's work. Christine, what is your earliest memory of encountering Gorey?
Well, it's an interesting one. I came to it, I think, in the most traditional way, what I like to call the Gorey gateway trifecta, which is basically how most people get into it. It's a combination of seeing the mystery, right? Mystery Intro on PBS. Everyone, that's really the main one that people recognize. Then there's the Gorey books. So growing up as a kid in the 70s, the cool kids and parents always had a set of Gorey, Gorey 2 in the house, which I loved leafing through. And then there was always the ubiquitous ballet poster in every girl's bedroom, the New York City ballet poster. So once I realized that all those three things came together in this same person, I knew who Gorey was. But then it was many years later, as a teenager, I was living with my older sister in Yarmouth Port, Mass. And she lived down the road from Gorey and Jack's Outback, the restaurant that he loved to frequent, where the owner would insult everyone and make you get up and order your own food and pour your own drinks. That was part of the charm of the old curmudgeon. And as many of us know, Gorey frequented that place. And so I didn't know that that was the Gorey that I knew and loved. And I remember seeing this guy and going, who is this guy with the coat and the rings? And I remember looking over his shoulder one day, he was eating something, and I saw the hands with the rings, and always stayed in my mind. Later on, I found out who he was. And then when Kevin McDermott wrote his fabulous photo essay, Elephant House, photographing Edward in the home, or photographing Edward's home after his death, the limited edition came with a photograph, and the first book I encountered, first copy of that, included an original photograph of Edward's hands with those rings. And it's like my most wonderful impression of him. And so that's my first, and I'm lucky enough to work with his books and artwork, and he's my guy. And I wore my Doubtful Guest colors today to represent.
Gregory, did you have a similar experience with?
I wish I had a really good story to tell. Let's say that I was trapped in a well, and Edward Gorey led the rescue party. And that's how I first met him. But in fact, I didn't really have any encounter with Edward other than watching Masterpiece Mystery. When I was a teen, I would watch the intro and, like everybody else, leave before the boring British TV show came on. Except for Lord Peter Wimsey, I watched. Other than that, I had no inkling of Edward at all until working on the Cape when Rick Jones called me and needed an assistant to work at the house. And I've been working with arts organizations all over the Cape. And I taught, and I was a writer. And I had two good friends who recommended me. The prerequisites for working here at the house were that there was one, and that was I can carry a box of Gorey's up and down the stairs. And I proved that I can do that, and I got the job. Other than that, after that point, I was put in charge of the exhibits, which at first it was really partially already done by Andreas. And I just took it over in 2014 show. It was a done deal. But after that, I started developing the exhibits. And I read everything, and I just been connecting the dots ever since with Edward.
And Patrice, how about you?
A favorite teacher in high school let me borrow her copy of The Doubtful Guest, and that the love affair began, but not having a lot of disposable income. There were those kinds of glimmers that Christine described. There was, seeing Masterpiece, seeing Mystery, and the Derek Lamb illustrations. And I was on a school field trip in DC at the Smithsonian bookstore, and I encountered Gorey for the first time, and I nearly missed the bus. I was on the floor, on my tummy, just poring over it. So I still have that copy. It's falling apart. And, the love affair continues.
Well, so I guess that leads into, what do you think, or why do you think people are so drawn to Gorey? All of you, like, what do you think is so appealing about his work that's led to this kind of enduring popularity over, 50 years or more?
For me, I think there's so many Goreys. So people come to Gorey in different ways. You can't appreciate Gorey. You can't really come to know his work without learning more about who he was. And there are distinct bandwidths, but I'll contradict myself and say they overlap. But there's the work that Gorey did for himself, basically his primary works. And then there's this huge volume of commercial work that people don't readily think about. I mean, before the close association with Brown and with Gotham, where most people came to know as a collector, Gorey was a very successful commercial artist. You know, he, when Dracula came out, it was like he was this new young wonderkind. Well, he was almost 50 years old at that point. He was a really successful person. And then the third Gorey, I'd say, would be the philanthropic Gorey that did so much work for the ballet and for his animal causes and for the Met Opera. So there are lots of Goreys, but there's still a universality to him. You know, he registered the human condition in some really wonderful ways. And Christine has a great story about the Wadsworth opening dinner that she should really tell about people and their relationship to Gorey.
I will. I'm going to preface it by kind of picking up on your point, Patrice, which is why I think everyone loves him. Getting back to that idea that the love of Gorey, it's a real cult of personality. I think that people come to his work first, and then when you get to know Gorey the person, he's so intriguing. There's so many different sides of him that people find, you know, interesting, delightful, and he draws people in to want to know more about him. But intellectually, and what he brings to the work is that he had a masterly way of distilling that droll, wry humor, but life, death, nonsense, seriousness. He could bring that into distinct words and descriptive imagery. And those of us who are drawn to him see that. And I love that real humanity and the absurdity of it. And there are many things that people find. He had a deep intelligence, a sense of history, storytelling, and you know, a fascination of people and circumstances. So I see that in his work. I think people do, and they collect the work to continue diving into that. The Wadsworth point that you mentioned, that anecdote, when they had the opening for Gorey's Worlds a few years ago, and for those of you who may know, Gorey he bequeathed his personal collection to the Wadsworth, not his own drawings and work, which are with the trust and other institutions, but the artwork that he collected. And they put on, Erin Monroe, the curator, did a magnificent job of curating the show of Gorey's influences. And I think it was eye-opening for all of us who collect Gorey and know and love him. And the dinner that night consisted of many of us in the Gorey world who contributed or helped in some way, and it was a blast. Gregory, we were there. I had fun pictures of me and Andreas. But the funny thing is about that, everybody who knew Gorey personally, and because Gorey was so intimate with everyone, he made everyone feel like they were his only confidant. And it was true in that room. Everyone I spoke to spoke of Gorey as if they had the inside story. They knew the scoop, and no one else really did. And it was like a murder mystery dinner for me in a way, because I got all the little stories from everyone. It was magnificent. It was like my own little Gorey story. So that's what Christine, on that. Yeah.
What you say about that is exactly what other people who are Gorey fans, readers, get from him. For a fellow who has such a cult of personality, Edward is very polite about stepping aside in his work, and the people who view his works have a very intimate connection to it, because he's not there. He lets you do all the work. You know, he just, in all his books, his self-authored books anyway, let's say, he he gives you markers within the story, and then everyone else is running through and coming up with your own interpretations, which is how he wants it. And so every single person who is a Gorey collector or just reads them, they have a very distinct connection with this man. That seems to be what drives a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he really he had a deep, long-lasting impression on and everyone who encountered him in life and in his work.
So I guess that kind of leads nicely into the kind of next area to discuss, which is collecting and collectors, and what commonalities do you see Gorey collectors sharing, and can you kind of talk more about your experiences with collectors and collecting of Gorey's work?
Who would like to start?
Hot potato. Patrice, you're the biggest collector. Come on, jump in there.
All right, I will. I'm sitting in my Gorey library now. So for those of you who are thinking about starting a Gorey collection, understand what you're getting into. And there's lots of different ways to collect Gorey. We've touched on the different themes, and we'll put some slides up and talk about that. But whether you approach it from ephemera or his books first or his posters, it's all wonderful. It's all wonderful. It's a lot, and I certainly would suggest getting started with the Antiquarian anthologies, and that'll help point the way for how you might collect. I started with first editions. I met some major collectors at Gorey Fest in 2006, and that was pretty eye-opening. I had no idea truly how much was out there. And at that time, I met Edward Bradford, who was compiling the Gorey Bibliography. And I worked with Edward for a number of years on the Bibliography, and that was mind-blowing in terms of just how many books Gorey had done covers for and illustrated and designed and did the typography. So again, there was sort of this feedback loop from the more I saw, the more I wanted to understand, the more I understood, the larger the collection became. But it's wonderful now to have a dedicated room, because I don't have to play Where's Waldo looking for Gorey all over the house anymore.
I'd like to go back to talking about what were the type of collectors, as you asked, Shannon. And we talked about this earlier when we were preparing things, and I like to generalize things. I think anyone who's a serious collector of anything tends to be kind of a humorless person, because they're driven, and here at the house, we see people who are driven, who come looking for anything signed. It's they want something signed. That's all they want, and they seem to be a humorless bunch. The other group of people are people who just take delight in his work, and in the content, and they're not really worried about the acquisition, or as Edward would say, the accumulation of the things. Those are usually generally delightful people, the serious collector. And then of course I contradict myself. Patrice is a wonderfully humorous person. You're not, you do not fall into my generalization. Our friend Todd Camp also is like that. I know collectors who are wonderful people, but the people who come to the house, generally, they have an agenda sometimes, which seems a little bit contrary to Edward's work, but it's not contrary to somebody who's obsessed by anything. It could be ceramic, it could be porcelain figurines, or Civil War buttons or coins or whatever. People who are driven people, and they're not necessarily the most fun people to interact with.
But they'd be wonderful subjects for Gorey. You can see him writing and illustrating them.
But, yeah.
right through the door.
Gregory, too, do you think sometimes what comes across as a doer attitude is just kind of being overwhelmed? I mean, I remember the first couple times I went to the house and I could not take everything in. I mean, it was just overwhelming to me.
Right.
You know, I was trying to just mentally take pictures of everything and soak it all in. And I was so worried I would miss something. And, you know, there were, I think Edward's cousin Ski was there that day, one of the deranged cousins. And I met Rick Jones really for the first time. And, you know, here were people who lived with him, who were good friends, who had lunch with him every day, who had, you know, who worked puzzles and went garage sailing with and
played cribbage with. Right.
All of that, yes. So it was a lot to take in, and I probably came across as very serious myself, or very quiet, and not my usual convivial self. Thank you.
Point taken.
Yeah. Well, Patrice, you have some wonderful pictures of your collection. I think that shows the breadth of the books and the objects. I'd love for you to, Shannon could share that with the viewers, because it's just really fascinating.
All right.
So, and I'm sporting a Gorey scarf today.
Yeah, it's great.
Where would you like to start, Patrice?
Well, let's start with the photo of the magazine covers that we used for advertising the session. So we put this together to just make the point about how long Gorey's been sort of in our cultural consciousness. We've got, reflecting here, 6 decades of Gorey magazine covers, from his earliest Harper's in the 50s all the way to the New Yorker cover with the cat fancy that Swann sold recently, the original art for, and everything in between. I mean, how many commercial artists can one think of that had work published in Cricket magazine for kids all the way to Playboy?
Yeah.
There's just so much variety there. And I don't think people really fully get how ubiquitous Gorey has been as part of our culture for so long.
Yeah.
So you want to go to the doubtful guest, the yellow doubtful guests?
That one or the other one?
That one. This is the one I meant.
Okay.
Because I encountered Gorey first through the doubtful guest, that's kind of a subcategory collection of mine. And you can see there's not been a whole lot of variety from the first publication in 57 to a more recent one by Harcourt. So same color. We have the same, you know, some came with dust jackets, some didn't, but this one's just scaled down. But when we go to foreign editions of the doubtful guest,
You're just on it there.
There's a whole lot of variety, but he's been interpreted in different ways. So I find that fascinating. When I find a new publication in a new language for doubtful, he has to be on my shelf.
Well, you want to show the slide of the doll too, because we have a nice image of that when we sold
This one?
one of the lettered. There's one of the box in my the box and the doll. Yeah, yeah, right there, so people can see it. Yeah, and that's really cute. That was Gorey issued a series of lettered and of numbered dolls. This was one of the lettered ones that we sold, I think, back in 2014. So it came in that original box, which you don't often find. It was just cardboard with a label. So if a collector can find the doll intact in good shape in the box with the original label, that's a real find. And the prices for that have really, run the gamut over the years. But I guess the story goes that there was a fan came up with a prototype of the doll, and Gorey really loved it, and, and generally approved of the stats, but he did insist that the stripes on the scarf be equidistant in his very particular fashion. So it's a great little piece and fun for collectors. It's one of those holy grails of Gorey collecting.
Very definitely. So we can flip back, Shannon, to the critter slide that I provided. There we go. So I have my own doubtful. Unfortunately, I do not have a box, but he's labeled the same way in Gorey's hand, sewn to his equidistant striped scarf. But I wanted to show this slide to give kind of a range to collectors. My doubtfuls, the rarest of the animals of Gorey's that I own. And we have the black doll, that's the other extreme. You can still find a black doll for $35 out there in his box. I'll leave somebody else to tell the black doll story if they want to. But we also have a bah humbug. And here is one of the versions of a Gorey bat that were widely sold. They were both the bah humbug and the bat were made by Toy Works. And this was the British version of the bat that was sold as a kid's educational toy. He has black eyes as opposed to the one that we're generally accustomed to seeing with the red rhinestone eyes.
Where would you like to go next? Somebody had asked to see your shelves, Patrice. Can I show those?
Oh, sure.
You want to tell what these are?
So all my books are in IKEA Billy shelving, and I'm still working on reorganizing them, but my children's illustrated books are together. My John Bellaire's covers, first editions, are together, and I like seeing my critters, and I kind of move them around, and they'll visit different spots in the collection. I also have been working on a library of reference materials, so I've got theater books and ballet books that are associated with Gorey and various biographies. One of my collector buddies, Todd Camp, and I were lucky enough to score at a recent auction a set of, and we only know of one other group of them, but QRV buttons or pinback buttons that were magnets that Gorey used to test his metal paints, metal inks that he wanted to use in the QRV miniature book that Bromer published in the limited edition of that one. So all these red bottles that you see here will get different kinds of QRV labels as a little Gorey project of mine coming up. Behind me, you can see there's a chifforobe that's full of my non-book Gorey stuff. So all the ephemera, the periodicals are categorized here. Calendars are here, recordings. And one of the things that I've discovered is that one needs to be flexible. You'll start organizing things a certain way. I had all my play materials in one place and theater pieces in one place, ballet, and it just became too much. And I had to take it apart and rebox it and regroup, recategorize. So there's a lot of movement that goes on. The other thing I'll warn collectors about is understand that this stuff can get heavy, and one of my shelves has already failed. So we'll have to re-support that.
Oh no, you didn't lose anything, did you?
Pardon me?
Did anything get damaged? Is it?
Oh no, everything's fine. It's just I'll have to. But this bottom shelf is actually, or the second shelf is being supported by the stuff that's underneath it at this point. It's just a lot. I'm a very contextual person, and I get very frustrated when I see Gorey works razored out of journals or periodicals. I think context is really important to understand what that means culturally when it was presented. So I keep all my magazines are intact. And that's really a place where my collection has exploded. Edward Bradford, when I first started working with him on the bibliography, he only had about 350 periodical entries associated with Gorey, no matter what that category was. By the time I stopped working with Edward, I think I had about 1,350 entries.
Wow.
And that's still growing. One of the areas that I've explored that I think is fascinating, that I hadn't really run across anybody else collecting, is I try to find every review of every book that Edward ever did. And where those show up are pretty interesting. You wouldn't expect the Christian Science Monitor to be a big reviewer of Gorey, but they have been.
Yeah. Oh, Patrice, can I jump in? Could you explain to people Edward's project and the bibliography that you helped him work on, so they know?
Oh, sure. Oh,
sure. That, because they're not. I don't think people. It might be helpful for people to know what the references are to finding Gorey material, right? We've got like the classic Toledano, but explain Edward's, because I think it'll help contextualize your collection too.
Right, without taking anything away from Henry Toledano and Malcolm White as the publisher with Troubadour, and Jim Weiland, who first put together what looks like a bibliography. You know, they didn't use a standard kind of Gallup approach to a bibliography construction, but they're the primary reference out there to understand what there is of Goreys in primary work, in illustrated books, in covers, in typography. Edward Bradford, who sadly just passed away last December, actually spent more than 40 years working on the Gorey bibliography. So, and in a sense, it was a catalog of his collection. I don't know of anyone who had a larger collection than his. In recent years, it was purchased by the Library of Congress. So we all look forward to seeing that finding aid. And we all can learn a lot from the finding aids that exist at Columbia with Andrew Alpern's collection and John Carolla's with University of Hawaii. There's some wonderful collections to draw from to learn what's out there until Bradford's bibliography is finally published. But you know, Bradford was trying to capture, he prided himself on being a greedy collector who wanted everything. And I'll tell new collectors out there, don't try to be a completist. You will never, never, ever be. Enjoy what you find your lane, stick to it.
Don't die trying.
Edward's, well, I know people who are still trying. I never have. Edward was sweet enough one Christmas to give me 10 first editions of Bel Air, and I'm delighted to have them. And I love all of those, but I like the idea of that gift being intact, and that's all the Bel Airs that I need is what that gift was. I don't need all 30 of them or whatever. Christine, what else can I say about the bibliography?
Sorry, this wasn't working anymore. Oh, that's good. I just wanted people to know, because I think there's just people can like flounder when they're trying to find things to collect and how to collect. In fact, I was wondering, Greg, when people come to the house, do they ask you, well, when they visit the house, does it spark interest in them becoming collectors? And do they ask you kind of, what they should collect or what's available? How do you deal with that? And
well, there are some people who come just looking for first editions. We have a few. It's always changing what we might have available. But for most people, and of course this plays in well because they're in our gift shop. But I tell people who want a collection is to buy the stuff that's in print. Because start there, because it's inexpensive, relatively. It's the price of a new book. And that stuff goes out of print all the time. If you bought a copy of The Remembered Visit from Pomegranate 4 months ago, the book's out of print now. And that book is worth 3 times more now. If you bought a copy of, what else went out of print from them? Books that within a couple months ago you were able to buy are no longer there. So I would say buy those hardcore books, that really tiny reduced version of Doubtful Guests. And you should have bought their hardcover of The War of the Worlds because it's not available anymore as of like 2 months ago. Yeah. You should have purchased the Audrey Gore Legacy from Pomegranate because it's not around anymore. You could have had it for $14.95 from our gift shop or online. Now people are selling it for outrageous sums. All right, that's a pretty heavy return on your investment of just since the beginning of the summer. So I would say just buy everything that you can that you like, because it's not going to get any cheaper, and books go out of print all the time. So just working with Penguin Random House and Harcourt, Pomegranate, and whoever else I'm forgetting, and the stuff that the house has, you can get a sizable collection that will only become valuable with time. It will not lose value.
New York Review.
That said, they buy everything at the gift shop. So it's a happy ending.
Yeah. So Christine and Greg, talk about, collectors ask me often about signed versus unsigned copies. And I realize that can be kind of a complicated answer, but I'll leave it to you all to answer it.
Well, I think people always, signed usually indicates a more limited edition. And as we know, in the case of Gorey, there were signed limited editions, lettered editions. Sometimes he made up his own limitations, which are humorous and confusing at turns. I'm sure I see Shannon chuckling. Yes, cataloging those, that's fun. But I think everybody wants a piece of whomever they're collecting, and that that kind of locks you into the person. And the signed things aren't as well, they're a little harder to find. So I think that's people, they can't always afford them either, though. So that's something you have to think about with price points, with the books and with the ephemera and the artwork, which I can talk about in a couple of minutes. But do you find that, Greg? You said before people ask for signed material.
Yeah.
Signed.
And those are probably two different buyers as well. There are people who collect, and they want that monetary reward of this book was held by Edward for about 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds while he signed it and he put it down. To me, that doesn't, I understand the monetary value of it, but it doesn't make that book closer to me. But I'm jaded because I see Edward's signature everywhere, in our archives and stuff. But then there are the people who just like the content of that book. The object lesson is an astonishingly beautiful book, whether or not Edward held that copy in his hand for a couple seconds to sign it. There are those people who are strictly after Edward's art. They want to experience that art in the hand, and the handwriting is secondary. For other people, just opposite. They'll get a book that is, a book that they really have no ambition in enticement to read, but they purchased it because it had that signature on it. You
Mhm.
know, whether it was Edward's or anyone's signature. So yeah, they're two different buyers. You know, it's two different groups.
In my opinion, the best part about his signatures is when he signs it using his pseudonym that is an anagram of
Yeah.
his name. And he had like, I don't know,
Yeah,
I don't
that's
know, however many
15.
anagram versions.
Yeah.
And he would sign it, you know, dog ear ride or, you know, whatever.
Under
This is
Jerry,
in
all-
his signature.
Yeah, right, all the
So
Dear
great.
Dowdy.
Yeah,
Those
yeah.
are kind of what that does put it at another level of he's doing a routine for you. Almost,
Yeah.
you know, he's doing a comedy pattern for you.
Fun in the wordplay of it. Yeah, no, I agree. In fact, you know, touching on that whole idea of value and market, you know, we've sold collections in the past, and when we've done, we've often done collections within larger auctions. Of course, there's a siren on cue. Okay, sorry. On 25th Street, Manhattan. There's collections that have come in. We try to parse out the items that had a value of at least 300 all the way up. So smaller collections would be a sort of a subsection of a larger sale of fine books or illustrations. I think twice we've done dedicated sales. In 2014, I cataloged the Sam Spiegel collection of Gorey, his whole collection. So that consisted of books, ephemera, artwork, prints, posters, everything. And I had to make sure that that wasn't too much of a good thing. So all of us who are in the market are looking at any given time, how much material is on the market. And at auction, we're in a unique position because we set what's called real market or true market value. It's generally what appraisers will use. If you buy at auction, there's a buyer's premium that goes to the house, but that price is the recorded price, and that stays in the overall records. That's what people use. That becomes then the benchmark. So independent dealers, you know, booksellers, other auction houses are always looking at that. So the pressure's on for us to really be thoughtful about what we do. And there's kind of a certain alchemy to that as well. So I'm looking at the scarcity of the work, the quality of the work, did he sign it? All these factors that go into assessing a piece of artwork or a book. You know, and there's a lot of Gorey material has come on the market recently. I think this panel is very timely because a lot of auction houses have featured big collections in Chicago and Pennsylvania and New York. So, you know, it's wonderful for collectors, but that can also trigger an effect, what we call flooding the market, where too much material goes out at once and suddenly the prices fluctuate. I mean, a great example of that is the Mikado poster. If you look at the history of the sale of the Mikado poster over time, it's so erratic and you can't even wrap your head around it. You know, it's gone for the thousands, the hundreds, the mid-hundreds, the low thousands. It's wild. So yeah, it's tough for us sometimes to sort of lasso that and work with it. So that's my 2 cents on the market prices. And with the artwork itself, well, I'll say that. I've spoken enough on that for now. But when we talk about the artwork, I can tell you why I like the artwork and how it differs from the printed material and what we can find in Gorey with that. But I'm going to table that for now. So.
Well, you can go ahead and talk about it. I mean, you know, we're
yeah, because I realize it's like we have 15 minutes left. I do want to show some pieces.
Yeah.
I'll just say briefly what I love about the artwork is that we can see in Gorey's artwork an appreciation for his skill and technique that we can't see on the printed page. We can see sort of the bumps, the hiccups. Why don't you actually, Shannon, why don't you
White out.
what exactly. Did I don't know if you can see it, but put up the mystery piece. Yeah, there it is, mystery art on the second row left.
this one.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's a piece. So we're very lucky. We've worked with the Edward Gorey Charitable Trust, who they've been phenomenal in helping us to support Edward's artwork. They sell anything that they sell, they're licensing. Any of the pieces go to support the charities that Edward championed. And we're very happy to have 4 pieces coming up in our December sale. Here we go. That's an alarm. So this is one of the pieces that they've consigned, and it's a little hard to see here, but I show this first because mystery is such an important and collectible area of Gorey. But so he's very shorthanded with his characters, and it's wonderful. It has your Gorey tropes. It's got the murderess in the slinky dress, ready to like off the old woman in the wheelchair. You have the martini glass, all the things that Edward's known for, the man in the coat. You can go on forever, but in the actual artwork, and you can kind of see it around the frog. There's whiteout. It tends to be whiteout and correction fluid around anatomy. I find that sometimes he's a little unsure of how he wants the placement of anatomical pieces, hands, legs. So in this piece, there is correction fluid around the frog and around the woman, under her hat, around her arm. So it's interesting to see that, and in the light and in reality, in real life, you can see these detailed on the artwork, and it really gives you a sense of what he did, what he put into art, and how he how he brought that to life on the page. And if we switch over to the other piece we have coming up, the Signals artwork, go to the second one that says Signals artwork with swatch. I just want to point this out quickly. I know we're running out of time, but this is a fascinating piece because this is the piece that Gorey ultimately abandoned. He doesn't often, I mean, he did occasionally, but we think of him as so sure-handed, so swift with his hand and his pen. And he generally was, but like all artists, he sometimes ran into a corner that he couldn't get out of. This is a study for a print that was for the for Signals. Signals was a catalog that featured a lot of the PBS, when it started, featured a lot of the PBS material and collectibles, always carried a lot of Gorey work. He did a series of prints for them. This was one he tried but abandoned, and you can see when you come in on it fairly closely, the pen work on the wallpaper, and we all know Gorey loved intricate wallpaper, was a master at it. But here he's trying to create this multi-layered image of a building from the outside and the inside. And he has this peel away effect, sort of this trompe-l'oeil peel away effect. And he's creating fog and mist that you could see behind it. But his ink wasn't as fast as he thought it might be, and the sepia wash over it has blurred a lot of it. So you can see, especially on the left side, a lot of it kind of bleeding out and fading. In some cases on the dog's tail, you can see here, he just completely patched it over. There's a little collage patch. And in some figures, he didn't even finish them on the bottom. They don't, the man, the wall behind him, the woman to the left, they're not fully finished the way we think of Gorey's figures as being detailed. So it's interesting. It got too complicated, too fussy. I think they had to ultimately abandon it. And what I love about this piece, which I rarely see, I've seen dozens of Gorey artwork, I rarely see him working out a problem in the margins. And here in the lower right is this grid of paper where he's working out a crosshatch design for the wallpaper in the upper right portion of the image. And he's grappling with spacing and white space versus the graphic black. And I love that. I absolutely love that. That's just real physical evidence of his commitment to the design and detail. So much to find in Gorey. But this is something you see in the artwork that you may not see in print, and something that collectors, may choose to delve into. But these are the reasons why I adore it and advocate collecting Gorey artwork.
Well, so I guess before we head to questions, the last thing I wanted to kind of touch on was, some of the favorite ways that you have, collaborated, quote unquote, with Gorey and engaged with his artwork. So, I think Patrice kind of has the most direct version of that, but, Gregory, with your exhibits and stuff and kind of figuring out different ways to interpret his art. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's my job to, I have a great job, and it's to connect the dots of Edward's work. And every year we try to do it differently, but I've been doing it now since 2014, it's 8 years. Things expand every year, and at the same time, things start to come together. In our research for next year's exhibit and for future exhibits past that, we look at Edward's interest in silent film. We look at his interest in New York City Ballet, specifically George Balanchine's choreography. And we look at Agatha Christie. We look into nonsense. We look into children's literature. All these things start to tie in really nicely. It's like a beautiful web that kind of is created. Just how Edward references himself, and he references the things that he's interested in, and that becomes more and more apparent as we start working on things. Edward doesn't like you to put too much meaning into his work. He says it's the height of folly. He always warns you. I think he's throwing out a red herring in a way when he says that. But his work is full of the things that he loves. Within his work, we start seeing, oh, he got that from that he got that from that film. Or as I'm reading more about Balanchine and some of the storylines, the Balanchine's ballet, you go, oh, that's where he got that story from, or that's what it references. So as time goes on, and as the research accumulates, you get to see this big world opening up. We'll never get to the end of it, so it's very exciting for me just to see that stuff constantly unfolding. I don't know if that answered the question or not.
That was wonderful. Yes. And Patrice, would you like to talk about your collaborations with Gorey?
Sure.
I think you're the one who's been doing the first editions.
Yes, we can put those up. I had started binding in 2007 when I retired, and one of my goals or dreams was to feel like I was proficient enough that I had the skill set to go to or be justified to go to the trust and ask for permission to publish 2 books that had never appeared in book form before. They were favorites of mine that really deserved a special treatment, that seemed to me kind of fell outside of what one could expect for a trade edition. They just needed to be different and a lot of detail associated with them. So here's my miniature movable version of The Worsted Monster, which appeared as a rainy day activity in the National Lampoon. So I created a star structure with the various set or acts of the play. And the little book has built-in slip cases, and one holds a tiny facsimile of how the book appeared or how the work appeared with instructions in the Lampoon. And the other is the text of the play. And I bound that kind of like a traditional play. It took quite a bit of time to figure out just the right paper to print it on. I tried using conventional old onion skin that the real thing would have, that full scale would have been printed on. And the letters were so distorted that were in 5 and 6 point font that it was unreadable. So I had to, it took a while to identify the right paper for that. And then the whole thing is encased in this commissioned woolen worsted sleeve. And you lift that out of the enclosure with a sock, because the ending of the story, after the worsted monster has menaced the town, is inexplicably, the monster's gone and there's a huge pile of socks at the end. So that's my worsted monster. For the Mourning Fan, it appeared only in the literary magazine Antaeus.
Is that this? I can't see it under the.
It is under Dracula.
Oh, this? No. Sorry, I'm struggling to find it under the.
It's next to the Gorey House picture there. No?
Mourning Fan.
This is the worsted monster, and then where's the Mourning Fan? Sorry, oh, here it is. Sorry, I was.
No problem.
Got it.
So it's what I wound up with was very different from how it appeared in Antaeus, with just these pages of quatrains and these wonderful little thumbnail fan drawings, and to find the right balance of how to put that on the page and have it work. So here the book is fan shaped and the text is curved, and the brilliant Friedrich Kirsig in New Orleans of Small Fires Press was brave enough to take on printing this letterpress for me. But finding a paper that would hold the shape, print well, but not be so thick that it wouldn't spring out. I probably built 20 models of this with different kinds of paper and sewing it different ways before I found the right balance. But both the Mourning Fan and the Worsted Monster were in traditional Gorey fashion, created in editions from A to Z, with 3 not for sale, 1 going to the Gorey House and 1 going to a miniature book society competition, and 1 for myself. So thanks for asking about those. They were wonderful to do, and I enjoyed creating this tribute to Gorey.
Awesome. All right, so just quickly, let's talk about questions from our viewers. The first one was asking about Gorey. Was he an only child? What was his relationship with his immediate family? Do any of you know the answer to that?
I can go ahead. Or
go ahead.
Greg, go.
Edward was an only child child prodigy, born in Chicago, 1925. He seemed to have had a somewhat problematic relationship with his mother and his father. His father seemed to be absent a lot, and in fact, they finally divorced when he was about 12 or so. And doing this year's exhibit, we see photographs of, and we have on loan from the Trust, we have a family album that Edward's mother, Helen, took from his birth up to about age 8. And they're wonderful. We've had the book here for a couple of years. All the pages are loose. We've digitized the whole thing. We're using a bit of it in this year's exhibit. Edward's father is almost nowhere to be seen in any of these photos, constantly absent. His maternal grandfather, whose name I can't remember, is generally the father figure in almost all these pictures that his mother took. There is a lot of pictures of his aunt Isabel, who I thought was Edward's mother at first, beautiful woman, who was unmarried, kind of a career woman in Chicago in the 1920s and 1930s. And according to Ski, who corrected me, because I was saying that it was Edward's mom, Ski says Aunt Isabel, she was the one who took Edward to see the Salvador Dali exhibit in Chicago, and took him to the symphony, and took him to the ballet, and was really the person who opened up the whole world to him while living in Chicago as a small kid. She later moved over here to the Cape, not far from where Edward's other aunt Betty lives. So that's the bio there.
And we had a question about Frank O'Hara and his influence on Gorey and vice versa. Frank O'Hara being his college roommate at Harvard, right? And so, is there any anything about that? Do we know what kind of influence he had on Gorey, or Gorey had on him?
Anyone want to try that? Mark Derry's biography covers that nicely, and he did a lot of research, and I don't want to paraphrase what it is that he says. It seemed like the relationship worked until it didn't work, and they're for two men whose works were so divergent. It's astonishing they were even on speaking terms for even a couple days, but the relationship lasted for quite some time, even when Edward's poetry was going off in a primarily backwards cycle back to 19th century, and O'Hara's was definitely not going in that direction. The relationship seemed to have foundered as soon as Edward and I guess both O'Hara moved to New York in the early 50s. They diverged into different directions entirely.
They were both students of John Charty, the poet, and there are some wonderful anecdotes. They're great letters and classroom assignments of Gorey's that he had done for Charty's classes, and there's some notes by Frank O'Hara in Frank O'Hara's hand, as well as about Frank O'Hara scattered throughout this manuscript set at the Ransom Center.
Oh, yeah.
And Frank O'Hara actually wrote a poem about Gorey that's published in anthologies. That's spot on, and we could, O'Hara definitely had insight into who Gorey was at the time and who Gorey would be. But there's a great story about Charty hiring them to wallpaper his hallway, and how well that went. And the house sitting when Charty had a sabbatical, and he hired Edward and Frank to house sit, and apparently Gorey had shared some of Frank's shall we say socializing that might have gone on in the Charty household that Gorey seemed to be not comfortable with, as his mother admonished him that maybe he needed to get out of that situation.
Right.
So we had a couple of questions about the Bellairs books. One of them is, Patrice, the 10 that were given to you by Bradford, were they all like the same title or different titles? Were there duplicates, or were they all different?
Oh, they're all different.
Okay, so they're all different first editions. And can you, all of you, kind of speak more about that relationship, the Bellairs Gorey, because he did the covers of a lot of Bellairs' books. So can you talk more about that?
There's 20 books that he did for John Bellairs that I know of, and I'm too old. I missed those books. I was like too old to read them. And they were too out of date when my daughter started reading the book. So those are books that happened from the 80s all through the 90s. Edward had just finished, it had gone to press, but the last of the John Bellairs books, and it was John Bellairs' last book, but he died either while it was written and it was finished by somebody else, Brad Strickland, I think. The Monster Under the Bridge was one of Edward's last covers. Not the very last, but it was one of a handful of some of its final commercial works. He still had the roughs to that cover on his desk in a studio over here. But as far as we know, John Bellairs and Edward Gorey had no interaction whatsoever. They never met. They never had a phone call. Everything was strictly handled by Edward's agent and the publishers of the Bellairs books. So people think that they're sitting together, throwing ideas off each other. And a lot of people just, when they think of their childhood, they think of those Bellairs covers as just quintessential collaborations. And it's funny to think that it's a commercial venture that Edward was paid to do the covers, and he probably read the books, and he probably enjoyed the books because he liked young adult literature. He was crazy about it, but that he never really needed to converse with John Bellairs, and there's no information that I've ever seen or heard of that Bellairs had any changes or comments on the artwork either. It just seemed to be something that they mutually were okay with and move on, crank them out, it looks like.
So do any of you know, is there ever going to be a revival of Dracula with Gorey's sets? Have there been any?
Well, there's been one in recent years, within the past 3 or 4 years.
In Houston.
Alley Theater in Houston.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. The sets, I guess the sets still exist. And I always contemplate where they exist. Are they folded? Do they exist digitally? But the sets, and I don't know who handles that either, Samuel French say, but it is still available as a package to be done. Katuitt Center for the Arts was looking into doing it here a couple of years ago in conjunction with the house, and it was expensive.
Yeah.
It's a very expensive proposition to do it. Maybe too
You have to bring
expensive.
Frank Langella back.
Yeah, I know.
Julia, that's how we do it. Yeah.
That would be it. But yeah, I think that was in 2014 or 15, maybe 16, that was done in Houston, I believe.
There was some talk a while back about a revival with Chris Noth as Dracula.
That would
have been awesome.
That would work.
Yeah, Mr. Big. All right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Do you know of a collection that exists of Gorey's complete ballet oeuvre? So the posters, the illustrations, the books, all that. Do you know of a complete collection of those, or does that even exist?
Oh.
A person who has a lot of it, we've been communicating concerning next year's show, is Robert Greskovic.
Yeah.
Greskovic. He has a lot of original art. He's been very helpful. But he did say, I'm not giving you any original art. He's been sending digital scans. He's uncomfortable letting it leave his house, his apartment. But he has a beautiful collection, a lot of original art for the Ballet Review covers. He has all the tchotchkes that Edward created for the New York City Ballet, which I wasn't really aware of. Edward did, for a man who never collaborated with Balanchine. Edward did a lot of stuff for the gift shop there. There's all these buttons, and there's buttons for specific ballets,
Coffee cup.
Coffee cups. He did mugs. He did, of course, the design with the 5 positions, which they used on everything from bags to mugs to beach towels. But Robert has a good collection of stuff. It was really interesting.
How do you spell Robert's
I don't know what the
last
trust has, I'm not really sure what Will Baker, the archivist there, has come up with. I'm going to be finding out soon.
How do you spell Robert's last name?
I want to say Greskovic. Greskovic. Or the Greskovich. Yeah.
There's a wonderful essay by Robert in Aaron Monroe's catalog.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at right here. Gorey's.
And he's also a very generous poster on a Gorey Facebook page.
Yeah, Gorey's Worlds. He did an essay. It's Greskovic. Gres.
Yeah, I put it in the chat.
K. I believe he was the dance critic
Yes.
for the New York Times. Is what I want to say.
Wonderful writer.
Yeah, he's a good writer. And Edward was good friends with him as he was with Arlene Crochy as well, the dance critic for the New Yorker. The three of them talk about sitting down for an Algonquin roundtable, to sit down with those three guys after seeing a performance and listening to them shatter it to pieces would have been just a highlight of anyone's life, even regardless of whether you give an iota about ballet. But to hear these people dissect it must have been fascinating.
Absolutely.
Which is even the great tangent. Like Edward might have been just a great critic of dance or theater or literature. Just one of those great what ifs that he decided just to move in that direction.
So, Edward did do movie reviews for the Soho Weekly News.
That's right, he did.
And those are very hard to come by.
Yeah.
But they are fascinating, and he could be blistering.
So there was a correction. He is the dance critic for the Wall Street Journal, not the New York Times. But
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was just about typing that into the chat, and then it came up. So I wanted to make sure that was clear. Wonderful critic.
Thank
So
you.
one last question before we end. Was Gorey aware of the collecting frenzy of his work? And I apologize to everybody if there's questions that we didn't get to, but we're over time already. So do you know if he was aware of the popularity surrounding his work when he was alive?
Well, he definitely was. I'll jump in and other people please go on. But people would approach him on the Cape or to sign things. I have one poster that's inscribed to me, and it came to me by way of a brave soul who was a partner in my husband's firm, who lived on the Cape, who rang Gorey's doorbell and generously signed on the spot. So yeah, he understood his fandom, I think, and he did do signings at Gotham. As he got older, and he didn't.
Through Gotham, I think Andreas Brown would have made it clear to him the effect that as soon as he was on newsletters that the Gotham was putting out, that people were collecting him from his very first book. There were people collecting the Unstrung Harp when most other people in the world had never heard of him. And that was true for all the books that came out because of Gotham and eventually the newsletter that they put out. He had a big world of collectors. For most of his life, it wouldn't have supported him. Not probably to listen to the last decade of his life, maybe 15 years, maybe the time here in the house. But he had collectors, but they because through Gotham, it meant he still had to keep his day job, though. He was a very pragmatic artist, but I'm sure he knew that he was having an effect on people. He probably had no idea what type of people, but he knew that it was having an effect.
Well, remember when he started getting fan mail, that's when he put out the postcard. We were lucky to have the original artwork for that. You've written me to no avail because I never read my mail. He was getting so much attention, it was a little unnerving for him. And so he would have the printed postcard, he would just sign his name and send it out. He wanted to give them something, he felt guilty that he couldn't correspond with each person. And then I think that's when he really started to understand his fame.
Patrice, did you have anything to add?
No, I think, Gorey sort of enjoyed hiding in plain sight to a certain extent.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for taking part in this panel. This has been amazingly wonderful. And and thank you everybody, all the participants, everybody who came to watch. Apologies for going over by 15 minutes, but I hope that you enjoyed it. So yeah, everyone have a great rest of your day.
Perfect. Thanks. Edward would have loved that it's a full moon and an eclipse. Perfect day to do this.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody. It was fun doing this with you.
Thank you. Keep collecting Gorey and loving him. And yep, it's a wonderful community.
Shannon, thank you very much for moderating.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you for requiring very little moderation. I appreciate that.